Let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. You are here for the Maximize Your Testing Efficiency and Simplify User Management with Zephyr 6.3 webinar. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This session we expect approximately to be 1 hour long, including a live Q&A session. And we'll be recording this webinar and sending you all a recording afterwards, typically within 48 hours, so that you can reference it at any time. If there are any questions at any time, please submit them into the Q&A box here that you can see right here. We are closely monitoring and will be answering those questions. If there are any questions we don't get time to follow up during the webinar, we'll make sure that they are answered later on, and we'll follow up that via email. So some quick introductions. I'm Ashwini Sathe, Product Marketing Manager at SmartBear. I currently manage all Zephyr products under the SmartBear's Test Management Business Unit. We also have Dr. Milan Verma, who is the Global Lead for Client Services and our product expert, presenting this webinar with me today. Hi, Milan, how are you?
Keeping well. Thank you, Ashwini. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So our agenda today would be to do a SmartBear overview, go over key benefits of Zephyr Standalone. We'll talk about the main thing here, which is a 6.3 release, lots of exciting features coming in. We'll do a live demo of Zephyr Standalone, and at the end, we'll have the Q&A session. So here's a brief overview of SmartBear for you. SmartBear was founded in 2009 in Boston. We have grown to 11 global offices and over 500 employees now. SmartBear is widely known for its open source tools, especially Swagger and SoapUI. Today, we have over 6.5 million users and 22,000 customers trusting us with their software development. So our product portfolio spans across the entire software development lifecycle. We have products offering in each important category: planning, creating, testing, monitoring, and finally managing and analyzing with our Zephyr product. So doing a quick overview of Zephyr Standalone, you all are well aware with our product here, which is a robust test management solution that is managed independently outside the Atlassian ecosystem. And the key here is the best-in-class Jira integration that we offer. We have both on-premise and cloud offerings. So we wanted to give like a key benefits and discuss some of the key differentiators of our Zephyr Standalone product, which is definitely that it is an independent platform where you have full control and limited interference and performance dependencies on shared resources. The performance at scale is definitely one key benefit here, because with the horizontal scalability and efficient data modeling, Zephyr Standalone is very well positioned to provide optimum performance at scale and remains highly responsive with very large data set. We support up to 10,000 concurrent users, so it's definitely a great benefit for large organizations. The reporting capabilities are advanced. With Zephyr Standalone, we offer over 15 configurable gadgets that can be added onto customizable dashboards. So this is really key in visualizing data and helping to facilitate the decision-making process. So these dashboards can be further drilled down into your phases and folders to get detailed information your teams need. Along with this, the custom reporting capabilities, interactive reports will allow you to get visibility into all aspects of your software testing process. With multi-project, you can run cross-project management as you're able to, kind of report across multiple projects with multiple teams. And the dashboards play a key role here to bring back the information you need across projects. With multi-Jira, a very key capability here, with an easy one-time setup, you can, consolidate your data across multiple Jira systems and run all these instances simultaneously. So it ensures that your requirements are in sync with Zephyr. It's very useful in reducing the feedback cycle time as you're able to manage defects across Jira instances. Our global test repository is a very important feature because it's, allows your teams to have the centralized test case management. Your test leads, your testers can easily copy and share the test cases from global test repository into their individual projects that they're working on. So it promotes the reuse of test cases located in the global test repository and really helps to boost efficiency because it's eliminating the need to rewrite any similar test cases from scratch. So these are definitely a few key benefits of Zephyr standalone that we wanted to reiterate. Plus with 6.3, we are bringing in a lot more features, a lot more capabilities. And with that, I want to hand over to Milind, who will go over these release features and also demonstrate them in action. Over to you, Milind.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Well, let's get into it. So this new release of 6.3 has incorporated a very, very large amount of feedback from our customer base. We've incorporated changes around administration and permissions. We've made changes to the UI. We've made changes to the way that Zephyr standalone interacts with Jira. Very, very large wholesale changes, wide-ranging changes as well. Let me talk through a few of these, and then I'll actually go into the product and go to all of the key areas within the application, and I'll highlight these changes for you. Now, this release has got so many changes. We will be distributing a list, which is available via the support page, which goes through the release notes, just outlining one by one each of these new features and capabilities as well, with a link to product documentation as well. So, the first area is around roles and permissions. In Zephyr 6.2, we are able to create users and align them to roles within the application. So these could be roles for dashboard users, or creating test cases, or assigning test cases to sprints, or execution, or raising defects. Now we've introduced a new concept of groups as well. What we can do is create groups which can be crafted internally within the application, but also link these to external groups which may come in from an authentication mechanism like LDAP or Crowd. So we can take these groups and align some permissions within Zephyr standalone. Now, doing so allows us to manage the permissions for users, not just globally across all projects, but also project specific. So a particular user may have access to, let's say, a dashboard in one particular project, but in another project, they may have access to more detailed capability. They may be able to execute test cases and raise defects. So this notion of groups allows us to create groups of users and align these with either internal users created within the application or external users brought in via an authentication mechanism like LDAP groups or Crowd groups. What we can then do is sync users. So what could happen is when we connect up with LDAP or Crowd, if we have a list of users in there already, these users can be brought into the application. And when new users get added into LDAP or Crowd, for instance, we can sync and bring any new additional users into the application as well. One other change that we're making is around the global test repository. We obtained some feedback around how users are using the local repository of test cases and how indeed they're using the project test repository as well. Now, just as a reminder, the local repository inside of the test repository application for a release shows the test cases only applicable for that release, whereas the project test repository shows test cases or holds test cases that can be used across a bunch of releases. There's also this concept of a global test repository where test cases can be shared across a bunch of projects, across all projects. But there was a need to not only grab test cases from the project test repository and bring them locally, or from the global test repository and bring them locally, but do the inverse as well. What if we have a bunch of test cases inside our local repository, be it in a release or in the project test repository, and we want to bring it over to the global test repository so that it can now be used by others? The new capability brought in 6.3 allows you to move the ownership of a group of test cases. So I'll show you how, let's say some test cases have been authored in a local project, but now when we move ownership, they become owned by the project, the global test repository, and any changes made to the test case can either be synced with that global test repository, or any local versions can stay on their own version of that test case. There's been a few custom field enhancements as well. So one of the changes made is around cascading custom fields. So now you can create a pick list of fields, and when you select a particular value, let's say browser, it shows you all of the options available for a browser as well. Alternatively, if you have a custom field and it's aligned to a project, as in 6.2, you had an option to either keep it aligned to one project or align it to all projects. What we've now done is give you an option to select a subset of projects you want that custom field to be applied to. Thirdly, we've introduced a rich text custom field. So this can be added to a test case, and then you can start changing the font format, the text color, and also embed links as well. Now, when it comes to the Jira integration, we've already got a very tight integration with Jira. However, what we've done now is incorporate some additional data that flows through into Jira. And the way it works is that when you have a test case that is aligned to a requirement, once it gets added to a sprint and it gets executed, the link from the story to the test case is going to be mentioned at the bottom of the story, but also if any changes are made around the execution, you'll see the execution status on the right-hand side. As you can see in this screenshot, right-hand side at the bottom, there is an F representing a failed test case. In the occurrence that the test case has been used in multiple cycles, multiple entries will be created. So you can see how one test case has failed in a particular sprint, but then used in another sprint, it's still in the unexecuted status, let's say. Some other changes made. So we've incorporated some bulk edit features, not only to edit the contents of comments to add to them, but also to change the way that we work with bulk changes to tags. So tags can be added to, they can be replacing the existing tags, or they can clear the tags available inside a selected set of test cases. And also from a test case versioning perspective, if you have a scenario where a test case is updated after it's been assigned, if you need to pull that latest version of the test case over from the test execution application, it's now possible to do that. So now we have both ways. We can either push the latest changes from the test planning application into test execution, but testers can now pull and retrieve the latest changes made to a test case directly from the test execution application. Great benefit here because testers don't necessarily now need to have access to test planning. They can just go into the test execution application, sync the test case with the test repository, and bring over the latest updates. So with that, I'll get into a demonstration of some of these new features and capabilities. So we'll start with the administration area within Zephyr Standalone. And I'll talk you through the left-hand side items and the changes that have been made. And then I'll go into a given project and show you some of the project level application changes as well. So you'll notice here there is a company logo, which is mentioned right here, and then it's shown on the left-hand side. If I go into authentication, under the authentication systems, if you select LDAP or crowd, you can authenticate and select groups. All groups can be selected, or you can choose a particular set of groups as well. So we can select this group and perhaps select that group. Great. Inside defect tracking, there is now two ways to authenticate with Jira. When you add a new Jira instance, you can use cookie-based authentication as you've done before, but now there is also OAuth available too. So you can put in your consumer key and also your private key taken from your Jira application link. In customizations, the first place we'll stop at is resources. So here are all of the roles that we have inside of the roles area. If I select one of these, there we go, that's a custom role. You'll see here there are particular areas, particular capabilities which we can allow a group of users to access, some permissions that we can grant them. And notice that under each of these areas, there is also a delete capability as well. So we can allow users access to applications, but not give them access to the delete capabilities. If I hit the plus button, let's go ahead and create a new role. When we create a new role, we must choose a template. Now, these templates are going to be administrative templates. So we can add in any admin apps right here, or project-oriented applications from the project template, or any global repository app permissions as well from the global repository apps template. So we'll choose a given template to use. Let's go with project apps. And then we can select from all of the project apps available and the delete permissions as well. So we can create, for instance, a role with no delete permissions. And similarly, you can do exactly the same, but enable delete in that particular role as well. And when we come to groups, I'll show you how you can take these permissions and align them to groups of users. In the test cases area, we go to fields, hit the plus button, and let's create a custom field. And notice that we have a cascading field right here, but also a rich text field too. And for the project association, you can assign one project or multiple projects. This area now is not just a drop down with a selection of one project, but you can select as many as you like. Just to give you an example of the cascading field, and then we can have additional options over here. So now inside a test case, when the Chrome item is selected on the drop-down, it'll pop up with another field asking you to select a given version. Also, if you have a look at test step configuration, you'll notice that there is a rich text editor available for steps. Actually, also, when I come to test steps, I'll show you that there is a brand new column available in the steps, which allow you to insert comments. Now let's jump forward to user setup. So inside user setup, you have all of your users. To identify whether the users have been created internally or whether they've come in from an external authentication system, you can have a look at the user type column. So let's sort by that column. There we go. Now let's take myself as a user right here. There are at this stage some non-project app roles that we can apply. When it comes to project setup, we can apply particular project-oriented roles to a given user. So over here, I've got access to a couple of non-project roles which we've created, and I can align one or more of these. And at the bottom, there is an alignment of that user to groups. I'll mention a bit more around groups in the next section. So here are some groups we have inside of Zephyr Standalone. Some groups are internal, other groups have come in from an authentication system. So if I go into this one over here, we'll see the users as part of this group. And let's go into the guest one. That's the one where I am, right here. Okay. Now let's go to project setup. So this is where we're going to build our projects, and we're going to align groups to a project. We can also align individual users to groups to projects as well. So you've got a few options right here. So scroll down below where you update executions, on step status, share test cases with other projects. And below that, you will see an area where you can start working with the groups that you've injected from an external source or the internal ones as well. So if you pick a few of these, in fact, let's pick them all. We can align all of these to a chosen project and then start picking the project-oriented roles that we need to give. So these will be project apps and dashboard apps that we can give. Now, if you don't want to align a group of users to a project, no worries. You can individually select your users and align them to a given project. So that's it from an administration perspective. Now let's jump into a project, a release, and start looking at some of the features and capabilities available, some new features and capabilities available. So notice here that when I'm looking through requirements, I can multi-select requirements and I'll see how many have been selected. And this is mainly to do with pagination, because when you've got requirements that span across multiple pages and you want to select them for the purpose of cloning or mapping or bulk editing, you want to make sure that you're selecting across all pages. So the select all allows you to do that. And then as you browse through different pages, you can deselect and this count will update accordingly. And this applies to all of the tables across all of the applications as well. Let's go into the test repository and take a look at a test case. We have a test case right here. Now this test case has gone through a few versions. It's actually been taken from another project. We'll see the details of where it comes from in a moment when I head back to the table. At the bottom, we see that the test case has failed. And if you have any custom fields like the time ID one, which we just created, the rich text area is going to be shown for this custom field. And also for the browser, the cascading field, once you select an item, it'll show you the options. Let's head into the global repository, the test repository over here. I've got a couple of test cases in there. So I'll just take a bunch of test cases from here. There we go. These two have already been brought over, and they're present over here. That's why we see them appear like this. Try and bring over one more if I can. There we go. So let's take this one. let's see, there we go. Let's change the ownership of that test case. Now we go into support. We see that other test case and we can open out the origin over here, type. We'll see it lives inside of the global repository. Now these, a couple of these test cases had come from a different project. So if I go to that other project, you'll see them over here. And if I modify them, you'll see this is on version 2 right now, but the global repository is still on version 1. So they're mismatched. I can continue to be on version 2 and the global repository can continue to be on version 1. That's absolutely fine. But if you do want to, you could always go to that test case and update it to the latest version. So let's go ahead and do that. So that's the test repository and moving the ownership from a local area over to the global repository. Inside test execution, if any changes have been made to a test case, for instance, this one seems to be outdated, we may want to sync the changes, push them into the test execution application. So let's go ahead and do that. And now we're on the latest version of this test case. Of course, you can still go into the test planning application and push the changes from there, but from a tester's perspective, if you just want to retrieve the latest version, you can do it straight from the test execution application. Now, this test case has been aligned to 3 requirements right here. In fact, if I go over to the Jira view of this particular story, you'll see the linked test case and the fact that it has been executed. And as I mentioned earlier on, if this same test case gets added to another sprint, you'll see another entry in here. If I click on the status, it'll take me into the test execution application. If I click on the link on the left-hand side, it'll take me into the test repository. And the tooltip shows me the project, the release, the sprint, and the phase the test case execution was done under. Now, you'll notice that the steps have some rich text capability. So let's head over to the test case in the test repository, and I'll show you how this looks, but also I'll show you the comments area too. So each of these steps has rich text capability. See that? And let's go to the comments area. So this is the rich text comments area. This is by default, whereas the steps, you can switch on and off to be rich text or plain text. The comments will always be in rich text. Now, from a dashboard's perspective, we've made a few modifications around not only how the dashboards appear, but also around the permissions as well. So if you have any dashboards which contain project data you're not allowed to see, you won't see those particular gadgets. So if a user has been given access to only a couple of, or one project, let's say, then, you know, a gadget configured to show multiple projects will not be shown to that particular user. That user can only see the projects that he or she is allowed to see. And secondly, when we look at these gadgets, the gaps that were shown in 6.2 in between each of the gadgets are no longer there. So each of these gadgets are now completely consecutive with no gaps at all. So we've made some UI fixes as well. So let's head back to the support page and go to online help. And I'll take you to where the release notes are. So you can see each of these line items. And if you have any questions or queries, or would like to see any of the other features or changes we've introduced, then we can certainly do that live. So we go to the 6.3 documentation. And then on the left-hand side, we go to what's new in Zephyr. And this goes through all of the features and capabilities. And this is the link back to the release notes. So with that, Ashwini, it's back to you.
Thank you, Milind, for the great session and demonstration. We have some Q&A in the chat box as well, if you would like to just go over that with our audience here.
So let's have a look. Let's see what we have here. So Kritika is asking how we incorporate actual results. Actual results can be put into the notes area within test execution, so that when we raise defects against the test case execution, any actual test result data can be incorporated as notes field information. And that's pushed into the defect when you copy as plain text or copy as wiki markup into the defect. Actually, what I'll do is just quickly show you how this works. So we go to test execution. We look at that test case and we raise a defect. Now, upon creating a brand new defect, we select the issue type. Let's do that again. There we go. Now in 6.3, we've actually incorporated a very wide set of fields where we're now bringing over most, if not all, custom field variations. The biggest changes here are around the sprint and epic link fields being auto-populated using your project data. So you'll see that, but then you'll also see some different types of fields also shown in this defect creation area. We bring over a very wide set of custom fields. So notice in the description area, Kritika, if you go to plain text or wiki markup, the test step, test data, expected result, as well as notes is shown, and that's where you can place any actual test result information. Let me have a look and see the other questions. There's two areas really, so I'll have a look at the chat as well as the Q&A area as well. Yes, Kritika, the notes do appear inside. So you'll see on screen right now, you've got test step, test data, expected result, and also the notes that get embedded into the defect when created. Okay, so let's see which other questions we have.
Folks, this is Fernando Matos. I'm on the call as well. Sorry, Milan, I'm invading the call.
No worries, just reading through some comments and trying to decipher and pick out the questions.
But I'm here as well to help answer these questions and talk about anything specific.
Perfect.
That's great. So Fernando is a product manager. Thank you, Fernando, for helping out here.
Sure.
Yeah, we have sorry, the question is around improvements to SSO. We have made some changes there. A couple of things. First of all, if you are a user added to Zephyr and brought over from LDAP, for instance, you can be auto-created into the user area within Zephyr Standalone. So you'll be added as a user. You won't consume a license at that stage, but then when the user is aligned to a project, they will then start consuming a license. But from an SSO perspective, when you log into the application, let's say you've been given dashboard access as part of SSO. If you've been given dashboard access, you'll go straight into the dashboards application. If you are authenticating to use other parts of the application, let's say requirements or test case repository, then you'll be redirected straight into Zephyr. You won't be navigated over to a secondary page. You just provide your single sign-on credentials and you'll be taken straight into Zephyr. So we've made some changes to make sure this is a completely seamless login experience. Yep, so we've got another question around test case import. Yep, currently the job cannot be used again and again. You'll have to create another one. There isn't currently a provision to, or it certainly hasn't been covered in this release. However, Fernando is on the line, is aware, and we can incorporate this into our roadmap once we have a feature request raised. So Kritika, if you could kindly head over to getzephyr.com/support, raise a support ticket, make sure that support ticket is of a feature request type, and just outline the use case there, and we'll take that feedback on board. It'll go straight to Fernando. The same applies for your components being disabled as well. We'll need to get some more details there, Kritika, whether the components you're referring to are from the native defect tracking system or the components related to Jira. If it's Jira, then yes, you just make that configuration change on the Jira side and all of the fields will be available. The enabled fields from Jira will be available in Zephyr Standalone. And yeah, you'll just need to clarify though whether the components that you're referring to are from the native defect tracking system or whether it's the Jira components that you're referring to. Stick that into the support ticket as well, please, Kritika, and we'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Milan, I think there's one more question there. Can we get the full release picture from Jira if there is a Zephyr linkage? I'm not sure that I understand.
Yeah, so when a test case has been added to a sprint and assigned to a tester for execution, at that stage, the story is linked to a test case, and that test case linkage will be shown inside of Jira. So from a release picture, you'll understand that test case has been executed, or at least has been planned for execution, and might be a not executed status, and you'll see which sprint, which phase it was part of. So we can see relationships of any issue type that we regard as a requirement, like a task, subtask, story, epic, new feature improvement linked to a Zephyr test case and its issue link below in that story. And then we can also see corresponding connections between defects and test cases as well. So a defect in Jira will show you all of the linked Zephyr test cases. So you can see that 360-degree view. So you'll see test cases mentioned as issue links to stories, test cases mentioned as issue links to defects. And beyond that, if you need to see anything more around the sprint or the entire release to see how many test cases you had, what the execution progress was in that release, you could either have a look at the release summary page, or you could have a look at the dashboards to get a full picture.
And Milan, I've been answering some questions on the Q&A forum as well. There's a separate forum here for the Q&A.
Okay. Anything outstanding?
So if anybody, no, there's nothing outstanding. I've answered some of the questions here. If anybody has any further questions, please add to that post as well. Milan, are you still showing something specific here for the question? No?
No.
So folks, if it's okay, I'm going to also post on the comments here instructions for upgrading. Let me just put this in here, and then we'll follow up to this webinar with the recording and with this information as well. So I've just posted here, right? We have a new process for the cloud. If you have Zephyr clouds, you can just use a link that's provided there and select a time that's convenient, and our team will upgrade the whole system for you and let you know when it's completed. If you have on-premise, of course, your site admin has to perform the upgrade, but I've included the documentation for the upgrade instructions. And if you want, you can request through a support ticket live guidance from the support team. Right? They will provide a link as well for a calendar where you can select based on their availability as well and a time that's convenient for you. And we'll have a team, the support team, available live to help your site admin through the upgrade process.
Thank you, Fernando. So I've navigated over to the test planning area just to highlight one of the questions raised around the line item in the release notes for the cycle progress and the phase progress. So you see all these visualizations over here. You can briefly see the overall sprint progress, both in terms of colors and indicators, but also the numbers as well, how many test cases and what that means in terms of the entire percentage in relation to the total set of test cases, either in that sprint or in the phase.
Great. So Milind, I think we answered almost all questions here.
Yeah, all covered.
That's great. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Definitely look at the upgrade instructions, and this webinar is recorded, so be on the lookout for the recording that will be sent very soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone.
Speak to you soon.